Okay, welcome back. We're on page 555 talking about the software development lifecycle or the system development lifecycle. And this is a traditional setup that's been around for quite some time. And there are some people that are not happy with this approach because they think it's too slow and clumsy and just takes up too much time. So not everyone thinks this is a great idea. So there's this list of advantages and disadvantages to using this traditional approach. So let's just take a look at that. So, advantages. There's a formal review at each step so nothing can get lost. There's an awful lot of documentation. I mean, every phase is some sort of a report that basically says, here's a list of requirements, here's a shopping list. The formal documentation ensures that everything can be tracked back to the good alignment, remember? And then the approach produces intermediate projects that you can look at. So in other words, I can say, well, here's how far we are now. And then a month later, here's where we are now, and here, just keep giving them information so everyone can see that the process is going on. Now let's look at the disadvantages. Users get a system that meets the needs only as understood by the developers, and it could be that's not exactly what they wanted. In other words, if you did not accurately articulate the requirements at the beginning, then you may have a problem. And this is an issue because oftentimes users are not in any position whatsoever to articulate what they need. They can't do it. Okay. Documentation is expensive and time consuming. Yeah, I'm going to spend a lot of time doing that. Often the user's needs go unstated or miscommunicated or the user said, well, I need this. And you go, got it. Well, you didn't get it. You completely misunderstood what they meant. Users can't easily review the documents, particularly because they're kind of technical. If I have a data flow diagram or an entity relationship diagram, I go, hey, look at this. I can look at it and go, I don't mean anything to me. So there are some disadvantages and there are some alternatives to using the SDLC. They talk about this cautionary tale about how companies have fired up traditional setup, spent millions of dollars, and then finally said, to heck with it, and kind of passed it off. So yes. Okay. The first phase in this thing is the system investigation phase. Okay. So let's just talk about what this phase is all about, because your critical understanding of these steps is critical. That's a poor choice of words. Anyway, your understanding of these steps are critical and will be subjects of many, many test questions. Okay. So what is the goal of this first phase? The goal of this first phase is to accurately describe the problem. Okay? So what problem are you trying to solve? You guys remember Star Trek Voyager? And they had this little holographic doctor, and every time he appeared, he said, please state the nature of the medical emergency. That's exactly what we're talking about here, is accurately, succinctly describe the problem you're trying to solve. If you don't get this part right, the rest of the system will not work. You guys remember me talking about the grocery store manager? He says, well, the problem is the shelves are too tall, so let's lower all the shelves. He did not accurately identify what the problem was. Okay. So, I'll warn you, do not get bogged down at this step by talking about solutions to the problem. Don't do it. I know it's so easy to do. To say, oh, well, we can solve that with this and this and this. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Just stick to your guns and say, let's accurately describe the problem. Once again, if you don't get this right, the rest of the project will fail, I promise you. So pay attention. Okay. The output of this thing. Well, the output of this first phase is basically a go, no-go document. A document that says, this is worthy of our attention. We need to put a little bit more effort into it. Okay, that's essentially it. Okay. So, what are the steps? Well, you need to review the request. Now, it is very, very helpful to actually have a request form, some sort of a piece of paper, that says, that the user fills out and says, here's the name of the description of the thing I'm trying to do, and blah, 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 blah. Give them a form to focus them on describing the problem rather than the solution. Because if you don't do that, if you just give them a blank piece of paper and say, do your request form here, they're going to say, well, you need to buy this product, So to guide their thinking, give them a form that's filled out that's all about describing the problem. How many times have I said that? Okay, must be important, huh? Okay, so that's kind of during this request, you'll get a stack of forms in. I used to do this for a living at one part in my career, where I ran a shop of industrial engineers, and what we did is we got requests in for things to do, and you had to go through the request. And I tell you, not a single request came in where I say, okay, I understand, we're good. Every single one of them, I had to talk to the person and say, now, what do you mean by this? So you have to ask questions. You can't just take a stack of papers and go, well, okay, we're good to go. No, it's not. All right. So, yes, you're going to have to recruit a team if you don't already have a team. Develop a budget and a schedule if you don't already have one of those things. Perform this investigation, which is what we're doing, and then draft some sort of a report, and then some sort of a review with that steering committee sponsor kind of guy, the person who has to say yes or no, we're going to proceed. Okay, that's what this is all about. So, building a team and the budget and the schedule, those are kind of mundane. You could read that part of the section of the book with no trouble at all. So let's kind of move on to some of the tools that you could use to do this. Well, there's a technique out there that talks about, well, okay, here's the request. Yeah. A preliminary statement of the problem or opportunity. Yes. Yeah. Briefly discuss how this effort aligns with the previously defined. Yeah, this is important. Again, if you had this on a form where you force them to talk about problems or opportunities and force them to show alignment and identify areas, where the scope of this thing is, then you're finally going to get someplace. Okay. Now let's get back to. And I'm going to skip over recruiting and budget. That's kind of boring. So now it's time to actually perform the investigation. So some of the techniques they talk about is called this Joint Application Development, JAD. Now this is not really anything fancy. What they're basically talking about is you do things in a group. So it's a structured meeting process that basically, it sets it up. You pull all the people together. Remember the end users and the stakeholders and developers and technical people and all that. Remember all that? You gather all those people into a very structured. You don't just have them show up and say, well, I think we're going to talk about this project today. It's very well structured. He talks about pros and cons. He talks about brainstorming and all the things that has to happen. And the idea is you don't want to waste people's time. You don't want to have them come into meetings to hear you ramble on. So the idea is that JAD is a pretty cool way. They have a little table here talking about the roles and responsibilities of each one of these things. So yeah, you're going to have a facilitator. You're going to have some sort of a decision maker because, yes, you're probably going to have some conflicts and gridlocks. There will often be requests where one organization, for example, you'll have one person that says, I need unfettered access to the accounting system. And then you have another request coming in saying, we need to lock down the accounting system. And you're going, wait, these two goals are completely opposed to each other. Somebody has to decide. Yes, the users have to be there. The system developers have to be there. You have to have somebody to write it all down. So the idea is the takeaway behind JAD is don't waste people's time. Okay, that's the takeaway. All right. There's a couple other things. Oh, by the way, and JAD is not just used in phase 1. Okay, this is a technique you can use for practically all of the phases. They introduce you to it in phase 1, but that's not the only one. Okay, cool. They also talk about functional decomposition. And that is, you say, for example, well, I need a stock management system. Everybody goes, yeah, that sounds good. But they don't really have a clue what that really means. You need to kind of break it down and break it down and break it down so everyone understands the scope of the project. So functional decomposition shows you, now here's what I meant when I said we need a stock management system. It's got to be able to do this. And so everyone gets to see how big this thing is. Because if I just said, I need a stock management system, person A might be thinking it's this big, person B might be thinking it's this big. So this is a communication tool to help show people the scope of the project. Okay, kind of cool. And once again, functional decomposition is not just only a phase 1 kind of tool. You can use this for lots of other phases as well. All right. The next one is feasibility analysis. During this preliminary thing, you can strike off the list a couple of projects right off the bat. And so this is sort of like a filter where you go through and say, this ain't going to work. So feasibility analysis. And there's a couple of techniques here. One is called technical feasibility. So this is all about, is it even possible to do? And I've had requests come in that I guess they've been watching too much Star Trek or something, or science fiction, because they'll come in and ask for something and I'll go, I'm sorry, that technology does not exist yet. So yes, make sure that these things are currently available. You don't really want to go out on the bleeding edge and doing stuff. Economic feasibility, sure, it's doable, but whew, man, we just do not have that in the budget. There's no way in heck. So that's a good filter. The other, some more, is legal feasibility. There could be some laws and regulations that are going to steer you in a particular area. And legal could include things like, copyright and intellectual property. It could be like, I've got a system and the project is to put this system out for the customers to see. And I go, wow. I mean, there's an awful lot of intellectual property here that I'm trying to keep my competitors from getting to, and I really, really, really do not want to have that exposed to my customers because other people can steal our IP. Operational. This is more about the human aspect of that. This is all about, if I do this and my people are they gonna be able to do it? Are they prepared for this? Okay, so this is all about user pushback, ease of use, those kind of things, because there are situations where you'll put together a system and the users say, I ain't doing it. I've seen it happen. So yes, make sure it takes into account the system performance and all those things. If the new system is slower than the old system, no matter what else it does, okay, you could have 10 times the features, but if it's slower than the old system, they're not going to like it. Okay, so operational feasibility. Schedule feasibility. Let's say, for example, that in order for me to implement this system, I have to have a 6-month downtime for my production plant. And I go to the production manager and say, hey, can I have 6 months to implement this new system? And he says, are you nuts? No way. So schedule feasibility. Can it be done in the amount of time that you have? So these 5 filters could be used to take a request in and go, toss that one. Okay, now the goal of this first phase isn't to toss ideas, but I'm just saying it can help you whittle down the list. Okay, kind of makes sense? Okay, let's continue. So you're going to end up with some sort of a report. That's what this whole thing is going to do. And some sort of an investigation report that's going to summarize everything you found. It's going to have recommendation to either approve not approve the project, but pass it on. In other words, it's worthy of going to the next step. You could disapprove it right there, saying no, it's not, one of the feasibility things just not going to work. You could table it for next time. You could fold it into another project. So your recommendation could have lots of things. And who do you send this report to? Well, that steering committee sponsor person who has the authority to say yay or nay. Now, at this point, typically what we do is we would take this stack of requests because, our capabilities were this big and the requests were much, much bigger than that. So we would produce a prioritized list of these projects. Here are the top 10 of the projects that were submitted, this year. And here they are in our priority order that we think you need to approve. Okay, so it's not just go and no go to the next step. It's some sort of a prioritization because people's appetites are a heck of a lot bigger than your ability to perform. Okay, this is a good place to start for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.